Hey, what is going on, guys? Lurkin here from Mobalytics, and I know we've all had a lot of fun with Hydra, but I've heard it from a lot of people. People are getting bored, and what's next? What's fast? What can I farm XP to either Paragon 300 or just to have some fun and finish out the season? And that is going to be Chain Lightning with Azurewrath. And good thing you already have a pair of axial conduits from Hydra there, but this is a really fun build. I've got a speed setup with Shaco and Raiment, and then I have a balanced setup with Perdition and Shroud of False Death, and then again I have a pit push setup with Perdition and False Death, and we'll get into the differences with all of those. But you know, I'm going to showcase and talk about the Shaco, Harlequin Crest, and Raiment version because it's the fastest and it's just so awesome and it's super fun to play. So is this a Chain Lightning build or what? Sort of, not really, but it's actually an Azurewrath build, but we use Chain Lightning as the vehicle to proc it. You see this orange value down here, 18,225 cold damage. This is procced off lucky hits. It scales with attack speed. It gets really high. I got details in the guide. Double, triple it. It's pretty crazy stuff, but we're going to use Fists of Fate to juice up our lucky hit chance, and then we're using Chain Lightning, which is a 72% lucky hit chance. I believe it's per chain. And then we're going to be using Axial Conduit to have our Chain Lightning bounce back and forth and get just a metric ton of hits in. And then the main reason why Chain Lightning sort of stands above all for Sorcerer in terms of Azurewrath builds with the lucky hits is because of this chance for Chain Lightning to hit twice on here.
It's free real estate.
You know, it's just double the hits, and it's on a pair of pants, and then it frees up your focus to run a cold damage lucky hit thing for even more damage, but we'll get into the full gear breakdown just coming up now. Alright, so let's get into our gear for my 16th take. So this is Harlequin Crest Shaco for that fat amount of cooldown reduction. Doesn't have to be greater effects to get a 1-attack teleport evade, but it does help a lot. Then we move into Raiment of the Infinite for these juicy ranks to glass cannon to boost up our damage, but we're just after the chest itself so that we can teleport evade down to enemies and clump them up and stun them. Then Fists of Fate, which are the main lucky hit driver of the build. So it's got an incredible amount of lucky hit chance. Preferably you're going to want this GA. If not, should be a very high value, 40-45% or more. And then you're going to want an aspect value of 275% or more for this to be a good item. We move into Axial Conduits. So I would say you want an aspect value of 3,000 plus. And then you are kind of going to want a greater effects on chance for Chain Lightning to hit twice. The rest of the stats really don't matter that much. So when you have a high amount of Chain Lightning to hit twice, you know, you get a lot more lucky hits, which is more Azurewrath procs. Then we have Orange Trail Boots. Orange Trail just resets our cooldown of our ultimate super quick. Attacks reduce evade boots so that we can teleport evade after every attack. Int max life armor, evade CDR, and then I do take teleport Nova size. You can take lucky hit if you want. I run teleport Nova size out of preference because when enemies are grouped up, you teleport evade, you get a lot more hits, and you'll get more Azurewrath proc, so it's just something that I like. You're going to have to masterwork these depending on your needs. You're either going to do intelligence, armor, or evade CDR, and it's just really depending on your stats, what setup you're running. Like I'm hurting on cooldown, so I had to take evade CDR. Then we're going to go into Azurewrath. The only thing that matters on here is this cold damage effects. You're going to want a GA. It's got to be a GA. And you got to double or triple credit. It's the main driver of the build. This is basically your skill that's dealing most of the damage. So, and luckily it's a unique. So it's only a 1 in 4 chance 3 times. So uniques aren't as hard to triple credit. You'll figure it out or you'll suffer forever. All right, so let's move over to our focus. So you're going to want Storm Swell on here. That's 35% damage and then another 15% for 35% times 15%. It starts to add up. You're going to want Intelligence, cooldown reduction, lucky hit chance to restore, which really helps with your mana. This one's very important. And then you're going to want critical strike damage or vulnerable. Cold is okay. This build deals a lot of cold damage. And then the thing to focus on here is this lucky hit chance to deal cold damage. You can do cold or lightning, but cold is preferred. And this value can get upwards of 5,280 if you get a triple crit. It's really hard to do, so don't stress it too hard, as you know, a lot more damage is coming from Azurewrath, so really focus on this one. we're going to go into Starless Skies. So the way you masterwork Starless Skies is really dependent on your stats, and it's dependent on sort of how your perdition, what the greater fix on your perdition is. Like mine's crit chance, I didn't have to focus on crit on my Starless. How the greater fixes of your Fist of Fate are. There's attack speed and crit here. What are your rolls? Are they 0.1%? And then if you have GA attack speed on Azurewrath. So Starless and Perdition together are sort of the keys to the puzzle to solving your crit chance and then solving your attack speed. And then my crit chance was solved, so I dumped the rest into lucky hit chance, and that's just what you do. Then we go to Telrash's Loop. You are going to want greater effects on cooldown. You're going to want to triple crit it. It makes the teleport evade so much easier. And then as high of an aspect value as possible, preferably 25%. We're going to go into our amulet, Shredding Blades. This is just a 53% damage multiplier. It goes on the amulet over Storm Swell because your ice armor can break, so it just has better uptime. It's the same damage. You're going to want Intelligence, Permafrost, and Inner Flames. If you never want to run Raiment, you can go for Glass Cannon over Permafrost or Inner Flames, but I'm missing 25% damage because I have GA max life, but I am one tanky boy when I have Perdition and Shroud on. You're going to want Evade CDR and then Critical Strike damage. And then you're going to want to Masterwork Inner Flames and Permafrost and like try and keep them as even as possible, 5-4 or you know, that sort of setup. You want to spread out the multipliers. So for our enchants, we have Teleport enchant. That way we can Giga Blast, and the magic number here is 1.9 seconds. That's what you're looking for. In the Harlequin Crest setup, it's not too hard to hit thanks to the cooldown reduction from the focus. And then we have Familiar Enchantment. So when we cast Ice Blades off the skill bar, there's a 33% chance that we summon a Frost Familiar that we can't make any other way. And I don't really want this on the skill bar. That'll give us 10% damage with cold. That's really nice. It serves another purpose too, and that's going to segue us into our Heraldric powers. From enchantments, going to powers, seasonal powers. You know, we have 68% damage with lightning because of these two enchantments. With the Enchantment Master Legendary node, that segues us into our Glacial Nimbus. We have 68 with lightning. We're going to get 68% with cold as now as a result, so that's really great. We're going to use Disintegrate. It's got a pretty low cooldown. Creates a nice line here. It's going to occur every time we cast Ice Armor. We're going to execute enemies with Bloody Charm with it. And then we're also going to get Unstoppable for 5 seconds when it goes off. And then it's going to shore up our move speed. This is a speed farm setup, so you're going to get an extra 70%. But we're at 60% move speed, so an extra 40 really isn't too shabby. Let's go into our gems here. Talk about some alternatives. So Scornful Light, you're always going to have this. You deal 20% more elemental damage, always auto slot. This setup in particular runs Seal of Power for 15% critical strike chance. Just requires 2 Power Arcana, which I kind of wanted. That helps shore up the lack of crit chance from running Harlequin Crest over something like Perdition. And then I go for Idol from Below. 6% primary core stat, 6% max life, unhindered, really nice. But if you do, sometimes the Jewel Guardians kind of annoy me, especially if you're not doing pit, like go away. The unhindered's great though, so that'd be up to you. But some options, you could always put Heraldric Crest for 10 to 15% damage reduction, or you can run Luminant Eye. That will decrease the skill that your power is attached to, not the Disintegrate itself, but our Ice Armor cooldown would go by 25%. We could put it on Ice Blades to lower its cooldown. So there's some options, and there's some pretty good stuff this season. So for our key passives, the best option is Enlightenment, followed by Verse Mastery, and oddly enough, Avalanche. But first, let's start with Enlightenment. So Enlightenment's got around a 70% uptime of this 70% damage, which works out to about 45 or 50% damage. We're casting shock skills and we're alternating with frosts, ice blades, and ice armor, so it stacks up really quickly. Then Verse Mastery, it's 25% damage reduction, but unfortunately, it should work out to a 75% damage, but unfortunately, Azurewrath has some hidden attack speed scaling that Verse Mastery isn't picking up, so I'd say you probably get around 25% damage out of this, so it's not the worst option. And then next is Avalanche. So none of this works for Azurewrath or Chain Lightning, except for, surprisingly enough, this 25% damage against vulnerable enemies you see here at the bottom. So it can be used. There's some builds that actually prefer it because it's just the easiest way if they can't stack up enlightenment. But chain lightning can, so we'll use that. And oddly enough, you can run frozen memories on the amulet, which will increase this value to 100%, and it'll equate to 1.6x damage aspect. So you'll get 1.25 from avalanche and then 1.6 from your amulet. So it's not terrible, but it's not the best. All right, so let's get into our Paragon. First is Tactician. This is a staple on Sorcerer. 15% damage after you cast a defensive. Rare node boosters are always in style, and it's got 10% damage. We're going to go into Enchantment Master. I'm not going to bore you with the specifics, but you end up with 68% damage with lightning and 68% damage with cold. I explain it in more detail in the guide, but I really don't want to bore you. So we go into Elementalist. This is going to give us, 10 to 15% damage from the additional bonus, a rare node booster for our non-phys, some elite damage, always in style, and another 10% non-physical. Then we're going to Static Surge. Static Surge is huge. If you're just starting and you're having mana problems, you can certainly rush this board second, but in terms of where I slot it for the end game, it's third slot. You're going to get 50% damage just for hitting enemies with shock skills rapidly, and every second you're going to be able to restore 30% of your max mana by hitting people. So this build really ramps up when there's a lot of people around. Next is Destruction here. We're going to get a large amount of critical strike damage additive, 12% crit damage X, and then another 14% crit damage X. We're going to move into Fundamental Release, a very good damage reduction board that offers a respectable 50% damage just by critically striking or applying vulnerable. We're going to put Exploit on here. If you have Flame Feeder leveled up, you can take the bare minimum in Flame Feeder. That'll give you non-phys X and damage X. And then you just ignore the damage to burning if you don't want to level up another glyph. But if you really want to min-max it, you go for Exploit. You're going to get some vulnerable damage. 10% damage to vulnerable, and then another 10% damage to vulnerable. Then we're going to move into our last board, which is Frigid Fate. Very nice, cheap board and compact to path into. So we're going to naturally hit this because of all the non-physical that we have on the board, but we're going to get 60% damage to vulnerable. Then we're going to slot Unleash. So spending mana is going to give us 25% more mana regen and 8% damage. It's going to give us another 10% damage. And I really like Unleash, especially in the 5th slot, because it's a magic node booster as opposed to a rare node booster. So as you can see, I'm missing a little bit of willpower, but I could fudge some stuff around, in a couple of these, and I could get that willpower up. But, these nodes can be kind of hard to hit, these rare nodes on the end caps, so it's nice to boost the magic because it'll boost the non-physical, the dexterity, the vulnerable, and the willpower. So that's really great stuff. And then if we get a little bit of lucky hit chance down here, so that's a nice little bonus. If you end up getting your gear super optimized, you have the GA cooldown, Shaco, all that jazz, and you're able to slot Okun's Catalyst. This is a bit of a lower tier farmer, good for Nightmare Dungeons, Helltide, and like T65 pits. But this is a hybrid ball lightning, chain lightning setup. I have it all in my guide. It gets 200% attack speed. It's incredibly fast. It's a big zoomer, inspired by a few people this season that I mentioned, and then by Operator Otter last season. But it's a super fun one, and I hope you guys enjoy. And what's next for me? Fucking Meteor, baby. Schmeteor. Gonna kill them goddamn dinos.